In this session, we're going to be looking at how to use while loops to solve problems, simple problems basically. And we're going to be looking and focusing just on counter-controlled loops. Okay. The purpose of this session is simply to give you an idea of how you can start to construct solutions using while loops, because it's a skill that a few people find it difficult to develop. So hopefully by breaking it down how maybe I approach it will help you to solve your own problems. So just a recap of what we mean by loop. This is where code basically is repeating. It's where we have a bit of code and then we are jumping back to an early part of our program and just running it again, and just doing that a set number of times. Okay, we've been looking at a counter-controlled loop, which is a predictable number of times that it will run, which is exactly what's shown on the screen here with this flowchart. Okay, so if you want an explanation of this flowchart, please check out my previous session. So remember, in order to run and use a counter-controlled loop, we first of all need a starting point. So this is the value that a variable will have in the initial part. So this is its first value it's going to have. The next part of this is when should we end? When should we stop? So this condition basically will be true whilst we want to repeat the code, and then false when we want to stop. Okay, so it's true when we repeat, false when it's not. We then have the code that we want to repeat, which must be indented, okay, as shown on the slide here. And essentially this is what we want to repeat, and also, and this is really important, the code which will take us from that starting point to the end point, the increment. And finally, that increment is absolutely crucial, because this is how we're going to make that condition become false. If that condition never becomes false, then we have an infinite loop and your code will go on forever. So there must be at some point a way for our starting variable, whatever value it has, to reach the end point, okay, whatever's put into our condition. Okay, we need that condition to be false eventually. So when integrating while loops with other codes, the first thing to consider is, well, what code do you want to repeat? So let's consider this code that I have at the moment. So what this code will do is we'll create a random maths question, ask the user to enter an answer, and then check to see if that answer is right. So let's quickly go through this code. So first of all, I use from random input star. So that gives me access to the random library, which allows me to pick a random number. This command here, rand int 1, 10, will pick a random number between 1 and 10, and then it assigns it to a variable num1. It then does the exact same thing for num2. So we have two variables, each with two different random numbers in them. We then calculate the answer and place that into a third variable, and this is so we've got something to compare against. I then use a print statement to display the question nicely for the user. I'll then ask the user for their answer. I use the int input command because I want this to be a number. So remember, input will return a string. I then cast it, turn it into a number, an integer, and then I assign that to the variable user answer. Then I will check to see whether user answer is equal to answer. Okay, so essentially these two variables, the one that the user's entered and obviously the one that we've calculated. If they are, I print well done. If not, then I say, sorry, I give the right answer. So if I run this code, it will say, what is 5 plus 10? Well, that's 15. Hit enter, it says well done. If I run it again, it's got 3 plus 9. I'm going to say that's 1. And obviously it gives me the correct answer then. So now I could, if I wanted to, just run this 10 times. Let's say I wanted 10 questions. I could run it 10 times and that'd be fine. However, I could integrate this loop. Now we already know how to create a loop which will run 10 times. Let's think back to our previous lesson. So I'm just going to do this underneath. So I'm going to create a variable. Let's call this x. Okay, and it's going to start at 1. I then want it to go to 10. So I'm going to create another pattern, and the number pattern I want to create is 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 10. So to do that, I need a counter-controlled loop, and that is going to end at the value 10. It's then going to just simply print out the variable x, and then remember, which is this part's really important, I need to change that variable x because otherwise I'll get in for the loop. And if I run this program now, you can see I'll get the numbers 1 to 10. Now what I'm trying to do is, well, now I have a loop that will repeat something 10 times because it's printing a number out 10 times. And I've got the code that I want to repeat. So the question becomes, how do I combine these two together? As it turns out, it's actually really easy. But a lot of people get confused by this. So let's actually kind of work it out. Now, the first thing we need to work out is, what are you repeating? Now, in this case, the first line from random import star, well, I only need that once, don't I? Because I need to import that library once. If I import it 20 times, that's not going to help me in any way, shape, or form. So that line of code does not need repeating. I'll just put no repeat. Exclamation mark. If I then look at the code underneath it, well, each time I ask a question, I want a different question, don't I? I want 2 different numbers, because if it was the same 2 numbers every time, it'd be a rubbish quiz. So I definitely need lines 2 and 3. Well, I definitely need to work out the new answer because it's going to be different each time, isn't it? And I need to print it out differently. I need to make sure the user has a chance to answer the question every time the loop goes. I need to be able to check their answer each time. And I need to say whether it's correct or not. So actually, as it turns out in this program, I need all of this code. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to go down to my while loop, and I'm going to delete this print x. And I'm going to replace it with all that code. Now, because I've copied and pasted it, the indentation's a bit mucked up, so I'm just going to tab all this in so the indentation is correct, and that's actually really important, otherwise this will not work properly. And there we go. So let's actually break this down a bit more. So I now have the code I had before, the code that I'd run for one single loop. I had the start my while loop, where it starts, and also when I want it to stop. And I've also, inside the while loop, got the piece of code that will make it go on to the next one. So if I run this program now, it will ask me a question. What's 10 plus 9? Well, it's 19. Well done. What's 3 plus 4? 7. What's 6 plus 5? Let's put a wrong question in there. Answer now in. Okay. And you can see it's answered this question multiple times. So I'm just going to type a few numbers in, just so you can see eventually it will stop. So I'm just typing numbers in, and you see it stopped after 10 questions. Okay, so we now have 10 questions there. So that's the basic way of combining a loop, a counter control loop, and other code and putting them together. So let's just go into how we start to structure our loops. So first of all, you write the main part of your code. What is going to be repeated each time? Okay, so in this example, I'm using a variable called coin, and I'm placing in it a random number, either 1 or 2, and those are going to be picked randomly using the randint function. If that coin is 1, then it's going to display heads on the screen. If it's 2, it's going to display tails. Okay, so that essentially will give me a random either heads or tails each time. So that's what I want to repeat. And essentially I want to be able to run this code a number of times, okay? A set number of times, which means I need a counter-controlled loop. So we then write the loop, okay? Now you may wish to kind of just have this in your head if you get good at this, or you might even want to write it completely separately. You know, I have seen people even do it in separate programs before and then combine it together. You don't have to do that, but you know, it's just a way to think about it. So we want to toss 20 coins. So we need a counter controlled loop which will run 20 times. Okay, so notice it starts at 1, it ends at 20, and is incremented by 1 each time. So this is going to run 20 times, and we've looked at why that runs 20 times in the previous video. The last step is to combine. So let's combine this together. So first of all, we need to decide which parts of this code needs repeating, which ones don't. Well, the from random import star will never be repeated, okay, and that goes for any program. Any time you got from something import something, or just import on its own. You don't want to repeat that. That just comes once. So I'm just going to move that up to get it out of the way. Then I need to bring in my loop. So I need my starting point of the loop. Okay, so that is going to be the starting value and the condition. I then need to indent in the code that I want to repeat, which is basically all that. And then finally, I want to bring in my increment, because otherwise I will have an infinite loop. And there I'll have the final solution. Let's consider the solution to the problem of working out the first 20 cube numbers. Now, to begin with, we need to actually do the calculation. So let's start off with a number, which is 1. Now, the reason I put this into a variable rather than just do 1 times 1 times 1 is because I know this is going to change. Okay, so because I know it's going to change later in my program, because I want 1 cubed, 2 cubed, and so on and so forth, put it in the variable makes sense. Okay, so I'll come back to that later. The second thing is I need the answer, don't I? So I can do number times by number times by number. And then I can print that out. So I'm not going to worry about the formatting yet. I'm just going to print out the answer. If I run that, you can see it works. If I do 2 cubes, I get the right answer. So that's working perfectly. You can, if you want to, use this operator in Python. The 2 stars next to each other is same power, effectively. So numbers to the power of 3. Giving the exact same answer. Okay, it doesn't really matter which way you want to do it. I'm actually going to stick with that way because then I'm not introducing any new stuff. Anyway, so let's think about how to print this out in the way that I've asked. Well, maybe it was 1 times 1 times 1, 2 times 2 times 2. So I need the number, followed by a times, followed by the number, followed by the times, followed by the number. Because I need it 3 times, don't I? Because I have the same number 3 times, so it must have that variable 3 times to make sense. And then equals, and then finally I want the answer. So if I run that now, you can see it says 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. If I do 3 times 3 times 3 is 27, so that's working fine. So I'm going to put that back to 1 because that's my starting point. So there's step 1 done. Okay, so remember step 1 where we're building up a simple while loop, a counter-controlled while loop, is to actually just decode it for one of them. Okay, now I need a loop. So I need this loop to run 20 times. So I'm going to create a variable equals 1. Then I want this variable to end at 20 because I want it 20 times. And then z equals z plus 1. And now I can combine those two together. Now, I'm going to copy that and paste it in. And I'm going to worry about the indentation. And let's see what happens. Well, that's not right, is it? 1 times 1 times 1, 1 times 1 times 1. Well, it's done it 20 times, but it's done the same number. Now, why? Why is it done the same number? What's going wrong? Well, let's have a look. Well, you can see here, number equals 1. Well, I don't want to repeat that, do I? Because that number should change. It shouldn't be 1 each time. It should be a different number. So actually, that code can go here. Let's try that. Well, that's not really done much. Well, let's figure out why. Well, actually, I've not changed number, have I? So how should number change? Well, I should add 1 to it. So I'm going to go number equals number plus 1. And I run that. Well, brilliant. Now I'm getting an answer. We can tweak this problem, this solution just one more time. Hopefully those of you who are astute have just noticed that I've got 2 variables, z and number. Both their numbers start at 1. Both their numbers, every time this code loops, has 1 added to it. And every time this code, when this code ends, they will both be 20. So these numbers are always going to be the same. So if they're always going to be the same, why do I need 2? And the answer is I don't. So actually I'm just going to get rid of z completely. And I'm just going to tweak this to be number. And I'm just going to tidy up the lines here a little bit. And there I have my final solution. Notice that I'll get the exact same output, but this code is a bit more efficient. I haven't got an extra variable that I didn't need. As it turns out, you know, both the solutions are correct. Just this final one is better. It's better to get used to it. Now, obviously, this has been quite a heavy session. This is probably the first time this has probably got difficult, but you might have just really nailed this. This is really important to practice, okay? These are skills that you require, okay? In the GCSE exam, for those who are watching it for that purpose, the big programming question will tend to ask you to write a loop of some description with some code inside it. And the process I have just shown you is exactly how you solve those problems, okay? Pretty much to the button, okay? There is another type of loop which we're going to look at later, but the process becomes the same. So this is not a counter control loop, but I call it a condition control loop, and this is one where you can't predict how many times it's going to run because it might be controlled by the user. Anyway, the practice task that I want to set you at the moment is to write a program which will add up the numbers from 1 to 100 and then display the total. Now, if you want to display the total as it's being added up, that's absolutely fine. It's not a problem. You can, in order to do this, have a variable called total, okay? In fact, you must have a variable called total, and this is on top of whatever variable you use for your counter control loop, okay? So you're going to need two variables, absolutely two variables. So you might have an x equals 1, and I have a loop which ends at 100, and then another variable called total, which starts at 0 outside the loop, okay? That's important. And then inside the loop, you'll add to it, okay? And on the screen I've shown you the kind of structure for that. So you're going to have total equals total plus something. Now I've put total plus 1 plus 2 plus 3, but actually notice there is a pattern, and that pattern is going to match your variable in your counter control loop, because x might start off as equal to 1, and then it's going to become 2, then 3. So instead of putting plus 1 there, you can simply put x, and you only need it once then. So hopefully that's given you an idea how to structure your answer. Have a go. I've got my work solution on the next part of this video. Okay, so if you're not sure how to answer this, or just want to check see if you're right, or maybe just completely confused and just need me to go through the answer with you, that's fine. Watch the next part of this video. So let's look at the model answer to add up the sum of numbers from 1 to 100. So we need a variable called total, which starts with 0. Then we're going to have the number we're going to add, which is 1, and then I'm going to have total equals total plus number. I'm then going to display the total out, and I'm going to run that. So it's 1. Now I need to move on to the next number. Okay, so I might have number equals 2, and then add that up again and print that out. You see now it says 3 because 2 plus 1 is obviously 3. However, that's obviously not the way we're going to do it. We've actually got the basics of what we need to do inside the loop, which is just simply take the current total and add on the new number. The number that's going to be changing each time is just this number. So we're going to add in 1, then 2, then 3, and all the way up to 100. So now actually we're ready to write a loop. So this is my variable that I'm going to be changing each time the loop goes. So I'm going to have while number is less than or equal to 100. This is the code I'm going to repeat. And each time the loop runs, I want to add 1 to number. If I then run this code, it just gives me the answer. If I indent the print total in, you can see it gives me a running total. So what's happening? Let's delve into this code a bit more. Well, I'm starting off with total equals 0 and number equals 1. So I'm going to be taking 0 plus 1 as my first initial kind of thing. So total plus number, 0 plus 1 is 1, and that's going to be assigned in total. Just so you can see this, because I think some people find this solution, although simple, tricky to understand, I'm just going to quickly go to Python Tutor and visualize. I'm going to type this code in and I'm going to visualize it. So let's see what's happening. So I'm going to run this. Total is 0, number is 1, total equals total plus number, so you can see total is 1, I add 1 to number, number's now 2, and I print it out. Now it says total equals total plus number. Well, total is 2, total is 1, number is 2, so 2 plus 1 is 3. So total, oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Just go back to where we were. So total is 1, number is 2. So total is now 3, number is now 3. Print total out. Let's do it again. So 3 plus 3 is going to be 6. So total is now 6, number is going to be 4. And it's going to take total plus number. Well, 6 plus 4 is 10. So total is now going to become 10. There it goes. Number is going to have 1 add to it, so it becomes 5. And so on and so forth. And you can see as I run it, you can see the value of total is increasing each time. So the key bits that we need to be familiar with is our standard loop, counter control loop, which is just this bit that I've highlighted. So the adding 1 to it and this bit here. So I'm starting at 1, 2, so 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4. So that's the reason I have that number pattern. And the code I need to repeat is keeping a running total. And this code here is what we use to keep a running total. We start off at 0, we add on the number, and assign it back to itself. Okay? You can think of this one as a running total as well, because we start off as 1, then we add another 1 to it, then another 1, then another 1, and we'll just keep increasing. As I said, this is a pretty heavy lesson compared to all the ones I've done. This is where Chrome starts to get more tricky. Some of you are probably absolutely nailing this already, so here is a challenge for you, okay? This problem is different. I want you to display the first 100 Fibonacci series values, okay? Now the Fibonacci number pattern is shown on the screen here, so if I maybe just highlight it. So the number pattern is here. Okay, and the way it works is this: you take the first 2 numbers, okay, so you take the first 2 numbers, okay, and you add them together. That then produces the next number in the series, okay. So then we add up 1 and 2, and that gives us the next number in the series, which is 3. Okay, I'm trying to show that over here. So 1 plus 1 is 2, 1 plus 2 is 3. Let's look at the next one. That's going to be 2 plus 3, which gives us 5, which is the next number in the series. And I've tried to show that over here. And then the pattern just continues. So 3 plus 5 gives us 8, and so on and so forth. Okay, so to do this problem, you are going to need 3 variables. Okay, so this one's a bit more complicated. You need, first of all, a counter controlled loop which starts at 1 and goes to 100. That's your first variable. The second variable is keeping track of the first of these numbers. Okay, so it needs to start off with 0. Your third variable, sorry, should start off with that. Then let's call this A and B. Then let's see how it's changing. Well, if you notice, the answer here gets placed into B, and the value B gets placed into A. Okay, so let's actually see that. So that goes there, and that goes into that one. Okay, so let's see that one again. That goes there, and that one goes into that one. That goes there. That one goes into that one. Okay, so that's what's going to happen inside your loop. Okay, it is a little tricky, but the code is dead easy once you understand that process. Okay, but this is a more challenging loop to actually get your head round for beginners. I've got the model answer on the last part of this video, and here's the model answer. So as you can see, I've got 3 variables. I've got my A and B. They start off as 0 and 1. And then I've got my counter controlled loop starting at 1. It ends at 100. I've just noticed that should say equals really. Sorry about that. That's a typo. Then I'll work out the current value of the Fibonacci sequence. I print it out. I then will do that kind of mixing and matching. So making the A equal B. and B equal total. Okay, that gives me the next value in the Fibonacci sequence. Add 1 to count, and I'll keep going. So that is the code for Fibonacci.